Hello and welcome to MAGA, the podcast. Now, this is not your racist uncle's MAGA. Our MAGA stands for I'm an angry asshole, the cult of Donald Trump. And I am your host, the disgusted American. The mission of our podcast is to show how Don the Con bamboozled our nation. Our goal is to help make sure the cult of MAGA goes down in flames by 2028, to stop it before MAGA becomes unstoppable and our democracy further decays into a dictatorship. If we want the cult of MAGA to end, we have to know how it began and why it spread. We have to go back to Trump 1.0, the election of 2016. So in our last episode, we explored the idea around who made fake news a thing. And the sad reality is that we all did. Trump did it by repeating the phrase over and over again. His minions did the same by spreading the word, and then broader culture did it by using the word so often that it lost all meaning. This week, we're going to take a look at the anatomy of a fake news story. If you wanted to frontline a crazy story, what exactly would you need to do? We're going to explore this through the lens of Pizzagate, the story that got Hillary Clinton to launch the term fake news in December 2016. So the Pizzagate conspiracy theory was built around 7 commandments. These things that you have to get good at if you want to be able to spread fake news effectively. These commandments were actually devised during the Cold War. And the primary architect of these commandments is still wreaking havoc in American society to this day. So let's dive into this amazing piece by the New York Times. It gives a bit of a backstory on the modern day fake news playbook.
May 21st, 2016, in Houston, Texas. This is an anti-Islam protest outside a mosque in the heart of downtown. And literally across the street, a counter rally. But not a single person here on either side of the street realizes they've been duped. They've been brought here, same place, same time, by 2 separate Facebook events. Posts which we now know both came from the same source, thousands of miles outside Texas, in Russia.
Активные мероприятия.
Cold War-style active measures in the American heartland in 2016. The same techniques, the same origin, even the same perpetrators.
Prevented the hardline coup from succeeding.
When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, pretty much everyone assumed that its disinformation apparatus died too.
Our government's view was problem solved. No more active measures, no more disinformation.
It also meant the end of Vladimir Putin's KGB career. But within a decade, he was back. First as head of the renamed KGB, the FSB, and not long after, as the president.
Putin is a child of the KGB. He spent years in the KGB being evaluated every year according to the active measures and disinformation he produced.
As soon as he took office, Putin got right to work. His first few years were spent testing disinformation inside Russia on Russians. But then he took it overseas, launching Russia Today, a global English language news channel. It was soon available in millions of American homes with a memorable slogan and familiar faces.
I've been reading about it.
Conflicts with Georgia and then the Ukraine gave Putin a chance to practice disinformation on a bigger stage, and he also started funding something called the Internet Research Agency, slowly putting his pieces into place. But Putin isn't sowing all this chaos just for fun. All along, he's had a single goal. See, in terms of population and GDP, Russia is actually a pretty small country, especially when compared to a unified Western world. But Putin knows that if he can pit the West against itself and break up our alliances, Russia is suddenly much more powerful and can take on other countries one by one. He's trying to reshape the world order in his favour, and disinformation is one of his favourite tools. Now, to do this, he's using a carefully crafted game plan, a playbook of sorts that he deploys again and again.
It's magnificent in its conception.
That playbook is designed to achieve a change in the behavior, perception, and viewpoints of foreign audiences and governments.
Both Todd Leventhal and Kathleen Bailey fought Moscow's disinformation more than 30 years ago for the US government.
They are good.
And if you thought convincing millions of people that the US government created AIDS as a biological weapon was audacious, wait till you see what they're up to today. But first, we need to take a super quick time out here because there's an awkward question you might be asking yourself.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Yes, America is no stranger to interfering in other countries.
The US has attempted to influence elections around the world for years.
But when it comes to disinformation, Russia is in a class by itself with unmatched scale and sophistication. And unlike the US, with its myriad of investigations, Russia does it without even a shred of public or historical accountability.
We must never allow the end to justify the means.
So this fake news playbook goes back a long way. The OG playbook was created in the Soviet Union, way back before the internet was even a thing.
Look, there's the playbook, and it's been a playbook that's been around for a very long time.
And so they're using that toolbox in order to try and get what they want.
So it's a textbook thing that they've known about for 20, 30 years and actually taught as part of their tradecraft.
So this textbook, toolbox, playbook thing, whatever you want to call it, the experts we spoke to kept talking about it on these terms. Ed Lucas has studied Russia for decades, first as a journalist and now as a disinformation analyst. Dr. Claire Wardle's an authority on internet verification at Harvard. She's been tracking online lies since 2008. And this is Clint Watts, former FBI and military. He's been shouting from the rooftops about disinformation for years. With the help of our experts, not to mention our spies and our detectives, we've reverse engineered the 7 commandments of Russian disinformation, a time-tested, step-by-step recipe to creating the perfect fake news story. So, rule number 1, look for cracks in the target society, social divisions you can exploit and wedge open.
They look for economic, social, demographic, linguistic, regional, ethnic, any sort of division.
And how can we actually emphasize those divisions and actually make people lose trust in one another?
It's like being a doctor. You have to understand a patient. Oh, he's got a bad knee, he's got a sore hip, he's got a disease that causes weakness here. But instead of trying to make it better, you try to make everything worse.
Rule 2, create a big, bold lie, something so outrageous no one could possibly believe it was made up.
Also so egregious that if they could get people to believe it, it would be totally damning.
Rule number 3, wrap that lie around a kernel of truth.
Propaganda is most effective when there's a little bit of truth in it.
The most successful operations of that kind contain some truthful element so that the disinformation is eventually accepted as a whole.
Rule 4, conceal your hand, making it seem like the story came from somewhere else.
Nobody was searching about the origin, how it started, who published the story first. This was, of course, a method then repeated again and again.
Rule number 5, find yourself a useful idiot.
Useful idiots are essentially people they would identify who unwittingly will take the Kremlin's message and push it into the target audience, the foreign population they want to reach.
They were idiots in that they didn't see what was obvious, and they were very useful.
And what happens when those pesky truth seekers try and debunk your fake story? Well, rule 6, as you covered.
Deny, deny, deny. Even if the truth is obvious, yet deny, deny, deny.
They will bluster their way out of things because they've realised that our attention span is quite short.
And finally, and this is a really important one, play the long game.
Russia's willing to play a long game and put large resources into things that may not bear fruit for many years to come.
The accumulation of these operations over a long period of time will result in a major political impact.
And if you think about it as a drip on a rock, today the drip doesn't have any impact. If that drip hits for a long period of time, years, there will be a hole in the rock. And they know that.
These 7 simple rules were a powerful weapon for the KGB, and they applied them again and again and again.
But how did the internet turbocharge these fake news campaigns?
But then something came along which changed the game entirely.
The internet has brought anonymity, ubiquity, and immediacy in combinations that we didn't have in the era of telex machines and shortwave radio and rotary printing presses.
During the time of my involvement, one operation can reach maybe 100,000 people if the paper had a nice circulation. Now that's ridiculous.
And with the internet's help, Russia has scored some big wins. The explosion at the Louisiana chemical plant that was caused by ISIS, the deadly phosphorus leak in American Falls, Idaho, and the list goes on and on. There's the claim MH17 was shot down by Ukrainian fighter jets, the thousands of Americans who supposedly petitioned to return Alaska to Russia. There's the Queen warning of a Third World War, the Syrian massacre that never happened, Sweden adopting the Islamic State flag, a made-up attack on a US Air Force base, Roy Moore, Brexit, immigration, and in stories that will sound eerily familiar, there's the claims the US was behind the Ebola outbreak and the Zika virus. From Black Lives Matter to the gun lobby, wherever there's been a division in society, Russia has used disinformation to pry it open, sowing chaos across the political spectrum. And now that you know the rules of the playbook, you can see how effective a weapon it really is. Do you remember Pizzagate? The one about Hillary Clinton running a child sex ring from the basement of a pizza parlor? It was everywhere just a few weeks before the 2016 election, and even inspired a believer to turn up at the restaurant with a gun.
A shooting in a DC pizza restaurant that was tied to a fake news story.
But that whole story was a classic Soviet-style con, straight out of the playbook. Pizza, anyone? To understand what really happened here, we need to go back to March 19th, 2016, and just here, actually, Washington, D.C. This is the time and the place where hackers got into the Gmail account of Clinton's campaign chair, John Podesta.
So the Podesta emails were the information that powered the Pizzagate conspiracy.
And you can guess who was behind the hacking of those emails.
Tied to the Russian intelligence services.
Big surprise. In fact, we now know the hacker worked directly for the GRU, Russia's CIA. The divisive 2016 election was the perfect crack to wedge open with disinformation, and, well, the lies don't get much bigger than a presidential candidate running a child sex ring from the basement of a pizza parlor. The playbook says you should mix little bits of truth into your lie, and John Podesta's emails provided loads of factual details to weave into the story. Comet Pizza's a real place, and there were emails between Podesta and the restaurant's owner. Rule 4 says you need a way to conceal your hand. Well, 6 months later,
WikiLeaks posted more than 2,000 additional emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, John Podesta.
Using WikiLeaks was a genius idea, helping to keep its hackers in the shadows. Meanwhile, Russia continues to push the story with fringe social media accounts, all run from the Internet Research Agency.
Over 50,000 accounts communicating automatically and in synchronization we've never seen in the history of social media.
Meanwhile, there were no shortage of useful idiots who were duped into backing up the lie.
Pizzagate is real. The question is, how real is it? What is it? Something's going on. Something's being covered up.
Now, the story should be laughably easy to debunk. For a start, the pizza restaurant in question doesn't even have a basement. But there's a rule for that.
Deny, deny, deny.
So when intelligence exposed Russia's WikiLeaks connection, WikiLeaks and RT knew exactly what to do.
We can say that the Russian government is not the source.
Despite there being no evidence to prove this.
Isn't it nice to have your own TV channel?
If I had to rewrite RT's slogan, it'd be question more, answer less.
80% of their coverage is actually excellent coverage. And because 80% of the time they're doing quality journalism, when 20% of the time they're not, then it enables people to say, well, no, well, look at this. Look, we are journalists. We have policies. We know what we're doing.
With days to go before the election, the story had taken on a life of its own, the magnificent long game beginning to pay off. That said, even Russia couldn't have imagined what came next.
A shooting in a DC pizza restaurant.
Pizzagate took just 6 months from genesis to the actual shooting at Comet Ping Pong Pizza. Now, as the story indicates, fake news should be laughingly easy to debunk. This Pizzagate story should have been laughably easy to debunk. But that's only true if we assume that people want to know the truth. The sad reality is that many people obviously don't. They want to be told what to believe. They want something that will help them make sense of the world around them. This is a big problem when we live in a Facebook world and our news feeds only feed us what we already want to hear. Crazy stories don't seem so crazy when all of our friends share, like, and comment. Crazy starts to seem pretty normal, and fake news starts to feel real. And the scary reality is that there's a point to all of this chaos. The playbook was actually designed with an end goal in mind.
2 insane lies, 30 years apart. One story took 6 years to take hold, the other barely 6 months. But they both share the same DNA, the same unmistakable trace of active measures, and the same goal: to shift the world's balance of power by turning Western countries on themselves. We're at war, and we've got absolutely no idea.
Those were Russians.
They were not Russians. I don't go with the Russians.
And we're facing a sophisticated weapon designed to bring down democracies from the inside, just as the KGB envisioned all those years ago.
Fighting war on a battlefield is the most stupid and primitive way of fighting a war. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in your enemy's country. Anything. Put white against black, old against young, wealthy against poor, and so on. Doesn't matter. As long as it disturbs society, as long as it cuts the moral fiber of a nation, it's good.
The virus that causes AIDS leaked.
With an assault rifle targeting a Washington, D.C. spot.
And then you just take this country, when everything is subverted, when the country is disoriented and confused, when it is demoralized and then destabilized, then the crisis will come.
I want you to remember the 7 commandments of this playbook as Trump's big bullshit bill gets rolled out. I want you to remember this when the essential Republican talking points between now and midterms get repeated over and over again. But before we look at some of the particulars, here's a recap of some of the most horrible aspects of this ghastly bill.
Republicans rammed through Congress literally the worst bill I have ever seen in my 20 years in politics. A quick summary of what this piece of shit actually does. So up to 17 million people will lose access to healthcare. Millions of poor people will lose access to food assistance. The richest people in the country get a huge tax cut. The total cost of the tax cut is estimated to be at least $3.7 trillion. This bill overwhelmingly helps not just the 1%, but the 0.1% of this country. It's going to cripple renewable energy. It funnels about $75 billion to ICE to build more mega prisons and send more masked thugs to our streets to beat up people.
This would turn ICE into the 16th biggest military in the world. It would have a budget that's bigger than the full military of Italy, Israel, Netherlands, Brazil, and Switzerland, to the detriment of healthcare for 17 million Americans, meals for 18 million kids, and hospitals in 300 different communities.
Here are some predictions about elements of this bill that are laughingly easy to debunk. But people won't bother to check, so this stuff is going to work. First piece. There's this insistence that growth will pay for the bill. So the trillions of dollars on the national credit card is going to magically pay for itself. George Bush Sr. got this right way back in 1980.
Voodoo economics. That's how candidate George Bush described candidate Ronald Reagan's policy during the 1980 presidential primaries. Mr. Reagan is now Vice President Bush's boss, and the phrase is something of an embarrassment. In fact, Bush said this week he never said it, but the record rather vividly proves otherwise. Ken Bodie has the story.
It's commonly believed that back in the Republican primaries of 1980, candidate George Bush referred to Ronald Reagan's economic plans as voodoo economics. Last night, Vice President Bush was asked about that and corrected the record.
Well, what I said back then, it's very hard to find. Actually, let me start over. One, I didn't say it. Nobody, every network's looked for it, and none can find it. It was never said. I challenge anybody to find it.
Challenge accepted. Let's go back to Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, April 10th, 1980, George Bush.
So what I'm saying is that it just isn't going to work. And it's very interesting that the man who invested this type of what I call a voodoo economic policy.
What was that again?
what I call a voodoo economic policy.
In this day and age, you simply can't go back and correct the record. Somebody's bound to have the tapes. This afternoon, the Vice President's office corrected the record one more time. Last night in Houston, they said the Vice President was only kidding. Ken Bodie, NBC News, Washington.
Voodoo economics. Also, notice how different the world used to be, right? We used to hold bullshitters to account. So they backed off when they got caught. Seems like a million years ago, doesn't it? So this idea, right, of voodoo economics or trickle-down economics or supply-side economics is built around this fantasy that if you cut taxes for the rich, their increased wealth will trickle down to everybody else. And it's a great fantasy. The problem is it's never worked in the real world. It didn't work under Reagan, didn't work under W, it didn't work under Trump 1.0. The deficit exploded under each and every one of them because it turns out rich people don't trickle down wealth. They keep it for themselves. So that trickle you feel is not money raining down from the benevolent rich. It's them pissing on your head. But people are going to be fed this story that somehow the sixth time is going to be the charm. And this fake news playbook will be employed to fool the rubes who just believe whatever Daddy Trump tells them. Second, easy to predict outcome is that these cuts in Medicaid and SNAP are not going to only affect freeloaders and deadbeats, but also poor people who desperately need health care. And if you're poor and MAGA, this language that's being used to describe you, about you being a freeloader and a deadbeat, this is how they talk about you when you're not in the room. But it's no coincidence that the bulk of these cuts are going to take place after the midterms. Like the video says, Americans have notoriously short attention spans. So 16 months, that's forever. And the question is will poor people yet again reelect the people that stabbed them in the back? I hope not, but I currently have zero faith in the American public. So if the Republicans took midterms, I sadly would not be surprised. The third piece of this ghastly bill that is easy to predict is that the increase in ICE, their budget, as bad as it is right now, with brown people being constantly pulled aside, harassed, and detained, it's about to get a whole lot worse. And they're going to tell us we need all these extra vigilantes to deport criminals and gang members. But again, if you look at the facts, it's just not true. According to the Cato Institute, on numbers through June 20th of this year, 65% of the people taken by ICE had no convictions. 93% of them didn't have convictions for a violent crime. So what the hell's going on? Well, the shift in policy resulted from Stephen Miller when he had a meeting at the end of May and he started screaming at the heads of ICE to start arresting more non-criminals. He said, and I quote, "What do you mean you're going after criminals? Why aren't you at Home Depot? Why aren't you at 7-Eleven?" End quote. Since then, ICE and Border Patrol have shifted to roaming the U.S. streets and workplaces to round up immigrants, regardless of the public threat that they pose. These are not the bad hombres. This is not MS-13. MS-13 is not hanging out in front of the Home Depot. What it is we're deporting exploited labor at farms, hotels, and construction sites. To replace them with who exactly? That part of it's never been answered. All right, so spreading fake news is part of the problem, right? If harmful propaganda and misinformation are inadvertently amplified as people face the fire hose of breaking news and interact with viral posts about a terrible event, then what we do matters. Fake news got so big because we help spread it. Sharing dubious information with even a small circle of friends can lead to its wider dissemination. Mike Caulfield, a digital literacy expert, devised a method for evaluating online information so we can prevent spreading it inadvertently. The acronym for it is SIFT. So what are the 4 steps in this framework? 1, stop. Pause before you react or share whatever you're seeing or hearing. I, investigate the source. F, find corroborating coverage from legitimate news sources, places you've actually heard of. T, trace claims, quotes, in media back to the original context. Where did this come from? So, according to Caulfield, I quote, there's just a human impulse to be the first person in your group to share the story and get known as the person who reported this thing, end quote. Now, this impulse is a daily hazard for journalists, but it applies to everybody, particularly during those moments of information overload when we have that overwhelming need to share. Why do we feel that need? Because when we share, it feels like we've done something. But if we don't check it out first, if we don't employ SIFT, then we often just make things worse. That's all we've got for this week. Appreciate you tuning in. And if you want to help out the channel, please subscribe or follow us on your preferred podcasting platform. And tell your fellow disgusted Americans where to find us so they can give us a listen. If you have a moment, please leave us a rating on your preferred podcasting platform so more folks can find the show. New episodes drop on Wednesdays. Hope you have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao. Bye for now.